ahead, Brian. I'll call the Sustainability and Resiliency Committee to order. This is John, your chair, and we'll run around the table and introduce ourselves, starting with Mike, please.
Hi, I'm Mike Williams. I'm a risk manager and a public representative for the SRC committee.
Dave Beats, representing the Fargo Park District.
Chad Brusso, Cass County Electric Cooperative.
Sean Paschke, XL Energy.
I'm James Hand, Director of Facilities for Fargo Schools.
Bruce Grubb, City Administration here at City Hall.
Greta Graymig, Public Representative.
I'm Ben Dow. I'm with Fargo Public Works.
Sean Radnick, Inspections Department.
Mark Williams, Fargo Planning.
Satia Hamidi, Youth Initiative Representative.
And welcome. This is your first meeting with
Yes,
us.
it
And
is.
you have a
Thank
big
you.
meeting today coming up. I'll call for an approval of the agenda. If somebody could make that motion, please. Or if there's any changes. Okay.
Move to approve.
Move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay. And approval of the minutes of the June 10th meeting, if I could have a motion, please.
Move to approve.
Move to approve. Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? All right. Now Bruce has arranged, we all know we're wrapping this year up. We have a meeting today, then we'll have one more finalized meeting in the Sustainability and Resiliency Committee as the year concludes. That'll be kind of our emotional wrap-up where we look at our journey and acknowledge what we've noticed over the time and maybe set the expectations for the future. But it's a different world these days, and sustainability and resiliency and that whole topic is just really difficult right now. But we have had a chance to acknowledge what we've done and where we're at, and what's been accomplished, and kind of set the bar for our community, including our parks and our schools and our partners with the city. So on that note, I'll turn it over to Bruce, and you can introduce our first agenda topic.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As you and I and Brenda were kind of talking about how to wrap up the SRC through the end of the year, I did reach out to our ex officio members. This is actually a while back, and asked if they would be willing to give us a presentation on their sustainability efforts going on in their organizations. And you probably recall at our last meeting, Chad with Cass County Electric, a really good presentation on their efforts. And then I followed up with James, Fargo Public School District, to see if he'd be willing to do the same, and he gladly accepted. And so this is going to be our chance to hear from Fargo Public Schools, and then we hope to close up in December with Fargo Parks. And I haven't talked to Sean and XL yet. We'll talk about that later, Sean, not to put you on the spot. But so with that, James, thank you for agreeing to do this and being here. And when you're ready to go, take it away.
The opportunity to present. Today I'm going to focus on our facilities. As the facilities director, that's probably, the staying in your lane, right, and talking about the things you know as well as you can. But we're going to talk about the past few years and what we've been working on, specifically around energy and sustainability initiatives within the district. And the place to start here, I don't know, I had a clicker. How do I advance the slides here? There we go. Looks like if I click that works. All right. In 2023, we did a comprehensive facility condition assessment of our entire portfolio. And if you're not aware, the district has almost 3 million square feet of facilities across 27 different buildings. It was actually 28 at the time. We still had the old district office on 4th. And as a part of that facilities condition assessment, we performed a preliminary energy audit that was meant to look for opportunities for enhancing the educational environment, for improving indoor air quality, for limiting disruption caused by significant equipment failures, reducing operation expenses, and reducing the carbon footprint that the district has. So what we see here, I don't expect you to read every number here and understand this at first blush, but essentially what this shows you is that across our portfolio, on an annual basis, we are spending about $2.8 million on electricity and $860,000 on gas, totaling about $3.5 million in annual utility expenses across the district. And the color coding on the right side, what that is showing you, you see the ECI and the EUI. The ECI is the Energy Cost Index, so that's your cost of your energy per square foot of building. And if it's green, that's good. If it's yellow, not as good. Red, typically not great, right? EUI is similar, but it's your energy usage, so it's your actual consumption of energy, how many therms, BTUs, all that you're consuming in your buildings. And you'll see we have some buildings that are in that nice light green to dark green, and then we've got others that have some efficiencies, opportunity for efficiency at those buildings. So, and we'll get into that a little bit here. This is just another way of looking at simplified information there. So it's our building and what percent of our energy spend we're spending on each building, which, not surprisingly, the larger buildings, your high schools, middle schools, are the bigger chunks of that pie. Davies is a smaller portion of the pie than, say, north or south, partially because it's a geothermal facility. It's one of the easy examples that you'll see on this chart. We do have other geothermal buildings in our portfolio as well, which you'll see. It's a little more obvious when we look at this chart, which this is our energy use index. So this is the amount of energy we're using per square foot by building. And what you would look at as far as the overall is that combination of blue and orange line. And what that's showing you is the electric and gas spend by square foot at each building. The lower, the better. Trollwood is a little bit of an anomaly because we use propane to heat, and I don't believe that's captured in this graph, so it looks abnormally small. But Discovery, Davies, Bennett, Kennedy are all geothermal facilities, so they do have a lower energy usage per square foot than the rest of the portfolio. And on the other end of that spectrum, you'll see the district office building that we're in was identified as having significant opportunity for improvement, which is why, and we'll talk about implementation in a little bit, but why we have a pretty significant HVAC project going on this summer, and will continue into next summer to get that annual spend down and keep that reliable like the rest of our buildings. Oh, the other thing there that is interesting is can we go back? Let's see, am I able to do that here? Oh, that's the wrong way. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll with the mouse here, and that, well, here now I should be able to click forward, but. We'll get there eventually. That is confusing as to why that is. I don't have the remote. It's just the mouse. Oh. Doesn't do anything. Well, the back one worked. Thank you. There we go. How much time do I have? I have a lot of slides, I just realized. Okay. So what you see on here, that yellow bar is the typical education facility in the Midwest. which, in Fargo, I think we have a little more extremes than some of the other Midwest, so it's maybe not surprising that on average, we're not, quite at that bar. But, overall, we're not too far off, and while we have opportunity, we're certainly, not hurting across the district. Okay. From that energy assessment, we did have recommendations that were proposed. And a lot of these are going to sound familiar for other topics that we've had, as part of this committee and that we've heard about. But lighting replacements is probably one of the most common ones that people talk about, converting old lamps to LED, which does save pretty significant on electricity spend. There is a lot of it to do. So we haven't replaced all of our lighting yet, but it's something that we're continually working on. Our athletic field lighting and parking lot lighting in particular were pretty significant opportunities there. And then when we get into plumbing and our water usage, using reduced gallons per flush valves, replacing restroom faucets with lower aerators, and smart irrigation controls. So our site irrigation, some of the portfolio was on smart, where it adjusts by the weather, right? So if you're getting a lot of rain, it automatically reduces the amount that you're irrigating your turf, and that can save a pretty significant amount of water when you start to optimize those types of operations. Envelope weatherization. You can have the best HVAC system in the world, but if your envelope is leaky and you're losing energy through windows or transitions from the roof to the walls or penetrations, then you're going to lose out on energy gains. So there are recommendations, spray foaming areas. There's some roofs that need to be replaced. There's windows that maybe are single pane that should be replaced with double pane windows with a thermal break to reduce that energy loss. So there was some recommendations there. We looked at our building automation system. So for a commercial portfolio, you could think of that as like a really fancy thermostat that is controlled centrally most of the time today. So basically, it gives our maintenance team the ability to define schedules in a building as far as when equipment is running, to try and reduce the amount that we are heating, cooling, bringing in outside air into a building when the building's not occupied, and save on our consumption that way. We also are looking at demand-controlled ventilation, which means, in this room, if you've got a sensor that can detect how much carbon monoxide is in the space, that can be an indicator that it's occupied, because when you have people in here breathing and exhaling carbon monoxide, or carbon dioxide, I think, anyway, that level will go up, and that could be your trigger to kick on your heating or cooling, depending on what season it is. And it'll turn on your demand for bringing in that fresh air, which increases the air quality of the building or the space. So there's a lot of pretty neat things you can do with a lot of technology that's out there, but we don't always do a good job of leveraging it because we don't realize it's there. So we had a combination of some upgrades and just some leveraging that technology that was already existing in our portfolio. And then, of course, replacing old equipment that is less efficient than new equipment, minimizes the potential for disruption. You gain energy efficiencies and comfort levels. And then finally, duct sealing. So if you are pushing air through your system and you're losing that air on its way from its intake to where it's being distributed in the building, that also creates a loss of energy and efficiency. So that is something that was recommended as well. As we go into, so those are the recommendations. As we go into implementation, it's definitely been a multi-phase. Like there's a whole lot of initiatives that come around this or come from this study. And first off, there's kind of the low-hanging fruit, which was the building automation systems. We updated to the more recent versions of the different software that we had for our building automation systems. We verified that our sequence of operations, or our scheduling, and when it was calling, when the system was calling for heating and cooling, that all made sense. We redefined our standards of comfort, which is the expectation that facilities sets that says, for example, our buildings will do everything we can to keep the temperature between 68 and 72 degrees. So if your building's within that, in your space, if you're in a classroom, wherever you might be, if the temperature is between 68 and 72, like, we're meeting that expectation. If it's above or below that, then, someone would enter a service request, and we do what we can to address that. There are other standards within that as well. But that, we mentioned the occupancy, scheduling, and night setbacks to make sure we're not heating and cooling unnecessarily when no one's in the building. We have started, and we were before, and we continue to update lighting to LED as much as possible. We try to leverage state and federal grants to help us do that. They're getting a little bit more difficult to get the return in the amount of, the payback period in the time frame that they're expecting, because now when you update lighting, oftentimes you have to update controls as well, and that makes the project more expensive, which means it takes longer to pay back that upfront cost. And then, like I mentioned, we did go in and update our irrigation to 100% be smart irrigation, so it adjusts for weather conditions. And then all of these actions at every building, so as part of our FCA, we actually had, and I don't expect you to read this again, but this is a snapshot into the system we use to track our actions from our facility condition assessment. So basically, one of these line items might be replace a boiler, right? Because it's at the end of its useful life. It's not as reliable as it once was. And it's got an action date, the year that it should happen, the year that it is planned to happen. We have criteria, and of those criteria, one of them is, is it an energy and performance benefit? So will we gain operational efficiency from that action? We have about 6,000 line items like this in this system that covers all of our buildings. So we've got a lot of actions that need to occur over time, but this is our way of organizing that and working to prioritize. Our main priority in these is disruption and safety. We want to make sure that our buildings are not having unplanned disruptions, right? If the boiler goes out in the middle of winter, that's a big bummer. If your plumbing doesn't work for a day in an elementary school and you have no toilets or sinks, that's we try to avoid that. So certainly that's sort of our top of mind. And then, of course, if anything is a potential safety hazard, but then energy performance is one of those considerations as well. The other piece of this is our vision and standards. So we actually pulled together a group. We've been working on establishing facilities design standards and educational specifications, and we just kind of wrapped that up. But we've got our like baseline draft of that. All of these are living documents that will continue to update because things change as technology changes, as priorities change, all of that. But we did have a group specifically put together to evaluate our energy and sustainability vision as a district, which included board members, community members, facility staff. I believe we had some teacher or teaching staff. We actually had Excel, we had Sean and Chad involved in that process as well from Excel Energy and Cass County Electric. And from that process, we built this vision, and I won't read it to you, but what it does is it helps us prioritize. If we're designing a new building, if we're remodeling a building, replacing a system, oftentimes there are a lot of decisions to be made that usually come down to a balance of what's the budget and what's the operational outcome and what are we prioritizing. And so what we're prioritizing first is the health and wellness of the occupants. So it means that getting enough fresh air, that our indoor air quality is at a level that is acceptable to the district is number one. and then energy efficiency and building life cycle sort of come in next. It's kind of tandem where if we have to make a choice due to budget, that we know where our priorities are. But they're definitely top priorities in our E&S vision. Since I'm going long on time, so I'll skip through this a little bit. In fact, I already kind of mentioned that. We did survey this group to help identify these priorities after meeting. We met 3 times for 2 hours each, and we went over a lot of topics, and we surveyed everyone to get an idea, like, where are the priorities? And so, for example, this one asks, what are the benefits and that are most important to you? And this is where you'll see, like, the student staff health was the top one. Opportunities for student learning and projects, not surprising that that's a high priority. Long-term operational costs was sort of, and modern comfortable learning environments were important. And then, the reduced environmental impact and enhanced community reputation were a little on the lower side. And the key here is that I believe we made people put these in order. So something has to be the lowest. You can't just say, everything is the most important. So it's not necessarily, if something, gets a lower score, doesn't mean it's not important to us or the person taking the survey. It just means this is the order of those items. So just want to make that clear. We talked about zero energy ready, which means you're not necessarily building a building to be, to have solar and to be net zero right off the gate. But you are making smart decisions during the design of a project to allow yourself to get there when technology and cost and whatever catches up with you, right? So it's putting infrastructure in place. Solar is a good example where you can put the conduit and make sure your roof structure is sufficient to put in solar at a future date. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're making that upfront investment, day one if budget doesn't allow. So that was something that was pretty important to the committee. Renewable energy was, kind of middle of the road. The durability was very important. So we asked how important is it that buildings are built to at least, buildings are built to last at least 80 years, which is a long time for a new building to last. Buildings are not built to last 100 years like they were 100 years ago. That's just not the cost is just typically not possible to properly build a building that would last 100 years. But in educational facilities, the expectation is that those buildings will be there for as long as possible, and they get used hard. To make a building, an educational building, last that long takes a lot of intentionality, and clearly from our committee, that was a really important piece. Designed for adaptability, so we focus on making the shell of the building really durable, but the inside flexible. We try to limit the number of CMU walls that can't be moved easily in the future. It doesn't necessarily mean we're using like dirt walls and that type of stuff, but when you use sheetrock and metal frame walls, if you go to remodel in 20 years, you can certainly adjust things better than you can. So there's decisions like that are important to us. And then the question there is, okay, if you want a building to last 80 years, are you willing to support higher upfront costs? Because that is what it takes. You cannot build an 80-year-old building without spending more upfront. And that was clearly a high priority for this group, was yes, spend the right amount upfront so that over the life cycle, we're being responsible for taxpayer dollars and make sure that we're being efficient with those resources. So sustainability is built into our design standards. It's its own section. It is mentioned in almost every other section in the document. I'm taking a long time, like I said, so try to keep cruising. I could talk about this all day long if we wanted. But one of the things we have is the life cycle cost analysis built in. So any decision, major equipment system, we're asking our engineers to utilize a consistent way to analyze the life cycle cost so that, like for us as a team, we get it in a way that's familiar and that uses the same, escalation rate, right? Because if one engineer uses an escalation rate, so the cost of things going up every year at 3%, and another one uses 5%, it's not going to math out the same at the end. So we have specifics in our design standards that say, here's how how you calculate that, so we can get consistent results and make good educated decisions. That's what that form looks like. And I can certainly answer any questions at the end if we cruise over anything that someone really was attached to. But I mentioned that already. One of the recommendations was, potentially adding solar to the buildings at some point, and it certainly is intriguing. Today, it doesn't, as far as from a cost standpoint, at the time of the report, it did not quite pencil out that if financial is your main driver, that it would make sense to do so. But it is something we'll definitely continue to keep an eye on as we move forward. And if there's ever opportunities like our neighbors at Moorhead, the state did fund some opportunities, and some of the Moorhead buildings actually have had solar installed on them for, I can't remember if it's free or just significantly reduced costs, and they're seeing some of the benefits of their reduction in energy costs and footprint. So certainly potential opportunities there. All right, with that, that is the end of my presentation. I apologize if I went longer than I should have. Appreciate the time, and if you have any questions, happy to answer them.
Anybody have any feedback or questions for James? Great presentation, by the way.
Oh,
Good
thank
topic.
you.
Bruce, go ahead.
James, Becky couldn't be here today, but I know at our last meeting, and she was going to update us on her, I hope you can help me out. You seem to know what she was talking about, and maintenance management system or something like that.
Yep.
Do you employ that same sort of thing within Fargo Public School? I assume you do.
Yes, that screenshot where I mentioned we've got like 6,000 items in
That's
there.
what that is.
That's that. That's it'd be considered a computerized, computerized maintenance and management system. And ours, there's different pieces of that, which include like asset management, which is, I believe, and that's what I was showing is that module, and I believe that's what Becky was talking about, was having basically a repository where all of your asset data and when things are due for replacement, how much it's going to cost, where the O&M manuals are stored, all that is, where the service record is stored. Yes, I believe that's what she was talking about. And I tell you, it is an incredibly useful and powerful tool as long as it's implemented well and it is maintained. And that's one of the harder parts is the continual maintenance of it, but it's important.
Maybe we can get to this one day. It was good, thank you.
Thank you.
James, I'm curious about geothermal. I remember when they put geothermal in Davies, but you've had at least a couple school buildings since then. I don't know if they have geothermal.
So the schools that have it are Davies, Discovery, Bennett, Kennedy, and I think that's it.
So Davies would be the last, maybe? And, well, here's my question then is, if, looking at your charts, you have a real result,
Yeah.
energy consumption-wise, why aren't we still doing it?
I would say the one thing that is not represented there is the maintenance cost, which is a consideration with geothermal as well. And I think over the years, we do see overall that we still do spend less, right, on heating and cooling our buildings that have geothermal. It is also a little more work, right? You've got, I think at Bennett, we have, it's around 100, I believe, heat pumps, or, and those are units that need to be maintained, replaced. We've got a pretty significant project on the docket coming up to replace all of those. It is something we consider, and we will consider for, we're planning a project right now. We're getting into design phase here starting tomorrow on a new school to replace Horace Mann Roosevelt and Madison on the Horace Mann site. And it certainly will be looked at there. One of the challenges is it's not a very big site, so there's not a lot of room for a geothermal well. But also today's geothermal systems don't require as much space as the old ones do. So there's just that focus on the life cycle cost analysis means that you're looking at more than just the upfront cost and say like the energy savings. It's the other pieces that go along with it too. So, and sometimes it depends on what grants and opportunities are to supplement that upfront cost, and there's just a lot of variables that go into it.
Michael?
So thanks a lot, James. Do you guys, you're talking about air quality. Do you guys use any UV in your HVAC systems at all? And are you, is that something we do here at City Hall? Do we know?
We do. I believe we added that at almost, if not all of our buildings. It was prior to me starting. It was during COVID. There was opportunity to add that, I believe, with ESSER funding. And so we do. And we do have that built into our standard now because we believe it works pretty effectively. So yes, the answer is yes.
Well, it kills the germs as it comes through. It doesn't do anything with particles, but it helps to clarify the air for any airborne disease. So, it's hard to measure, I suppose, is how effective it is.
Yeah, it's possible, but yeah, the air quality measurement, sensors and stuff out there are, we don't have them everywhere in our buildings, and when you do get them, there are different levels of accuracy and what you can track right and all that, but we do believe that has had a positive impact.
I can't imagine there's any germs going around with kids in schools.
Oh, my gosh.
Never.
I just can't fathom that. Sorry. Anybody else? Go ahead.
I know you mentioned that there was a committee of some sort that advises you guys on like decisions for sustainability. Would you ever consider opening up a couple of positions for students to also have a voice in the choices that you guys make?
Yeah, so we don't have a continuous group. This was really a group that was brought together with the specific purpose of establishing our baseline, like our vision and the goals that we're going to build into our design standards that we were developing. But would we consider? Absolutely. I think if there was, if we got word that there, was a student or a group of students who were interested in providing feedback that way, I would always be open to that. And one of the priorities in the survey was opportunities for student learning and projects. So anytime we get asked to assist in that way, we've set up a couple different sort of like one-off projects that some students have wanted to do and are happy to accommodate that.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Mr. Chairman, so in 2018, Fargo won the National Georgetown Energy Prize. It was a national contest, and we beat 52 other cities. But part of the reason we won is because the students, like at Roosevelt, they cut their power use by 30%. But it really, what we found was that if the teachers moved it well, it made it fun and interesting, and then if you tracked it, they could see their progress. But they were the reason we won.
Good feedback.
That is cool.
Good inspiration for future students, too. Anything else? James, a really great presentation.
Thank you.
This is now recorded for history, so people can see what the school district's doing and has done in a bigger compilation of your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Bruce, we'll go on to the next topic. I'll let you introduce it.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, in addition to welcoming our newest member, Satya, did I get that right?
Satya.
Satya, E.
Yes.
I got it, thank you. Satya, when James agreed to do kind of an overarching Fargo School District presentation, when Satya introduced herself to Chairman Strand via email, she mentioned something about an initiative or a project she was pursuing at her school, which is Davies High School. And so John suggested to me, why don't you ask her if she'd be willing to tell us about it? And with the Fargo Public Schools now, and we can hone in on Davies High School, we thought that'd be really cool. So thank you for being here and agreeing to do that. And I think whenever you're ready to go, did Brian show you how to get into your presentation and things?
Your first meeting and you're presenting. Now that's courage. Thank you, Satya. And welcome.
where's the button to put it into presentation mode? Do you just like right click?
Archie will come over there and help you.
Thank you.
James probably hit it.
All right, so a quick introduction before I start. I'm Satya Hamidi, and I'm a junior at Fargo Davies High School this year, and I am the Fargo Youth Initiative representative. So I'm very honored that I'm able to share this project with you guys, as it is something I'm very passionate about and would love to just hear what you guys have to say about it. All right, so just to begin with a little overview of what the project is, or the goal of it, it's to essentially expose and educate students on the importance of being environmentally aware and making it more easy for them to take actions towards creating a more sustainable future. And this project originally stemmed from an issue that I noticed in my school. So when I was in my English class during my sophomore year, I consistently had to recycle paper, but the nearest recycling bin that would have been in my path to my next class was across the building in my next class. And it kind of sparked me to want to begin a project that would make recycling much less of a burden on students and make it much more accessible to them so they're able to contribute to a more green future. And I personally believe that Davies is an incredible school in terms of sustainability. As Mr. Hand mentioned, Davies is one of the couple of schools in Fargo Public Schools that runs off of geothermal energy. And obviously, sustainability being one of Davies' main goals, I believe that this project has a great synergy with it. So this is the problem and the solution that this project brings. There are two main problems that the recycling initiative addresses. One is inaccessible recycling, and the second one is a lack of awareness among students. So starting off with the first one of inaccessible recycling, as I explained in my little story, the recycling bins across Davies are not accessible in every classroom. Some classrooms have one recycling bin, several, and others only have trash cans. And across the hallways, you might not even have an option to recycle things. And this results in students picking convenience over sustainability and them tossing something that could be recycled in the trash can. And this project works towards making recycling easier by providing visible and specialized bins for almost every classroom and increasing the number of recycling bins available in the hallways. And now the second problem is a lack of awareness. So the biggest thing that comes from this is apathy and not being able to understand what you're able to recycle and what you're not. And the way that this project targets a lack of awareness is by having constant updates around the school on recycling facts about Davies and just general recycling tips that students can take and apply in their own lives. And this is going to be done through posting frequent advertisements in the TVs that are in Davies High School's commons, and putting up posters around the building about what students can recycle and other tips and tricks that they must know. So here's a quick outline of what the project looks like. There was some progress during the last academic term, and then for this year, I plan on having the project go through 4 different phases as listed on the screen, and then there will be a conclusion period and data analyzing period in May, where we'll go through and understand how effective the project was and what steps we must take in the future to change the project and make it even more effective and more accessible to students. So, beginning with looking at the progress that was made last year, when I first recognized the problem in my English classroom, I brought it up to the environmental club advisor, and through this, he helped me develop this whole project, and I greatly credit him for a lot of the things that we've been able to accomplish so far. So the biggest progress that we made last year was sending out a survey about recycling to all the teachers at Davies High School, and although we didn't get every single teacher to fill out the survey, we got a pretty good amount, which was 22 teachers, and they essentially had to explain to us through a survey and just clicking little multiple choice questions how they felt recycling was working at the school, how they felt it was in their own building, in their own classroom, and whether or not they would like a customized recycling bin or even to have a recycling bin in their classroom. And then some of the data that we collected is on the right-hand side, but I will talk about that in a little bit. And some adjustments from this year compared to last year is going to the teacher survey. So at first, the teacher survey allowed teachers to describe how they wanted the recycling bin to look like and whether they wanted any designs to go along with it. But since this project is very student-led, it would be very hard to have students who might not be as artistically skilled as others to make intricate designs. So what we plan on doing is instead of having teachers go into detail of what description they would like, they would have 5 options of colors and 5 options of patterns, just so it's less overwhelming for them to determine what they want the recycling bin to look like, and so that the students who are participating in this project will be able to help with it as well. So looking at the data that was collected from this survey last year, out of the 22 teachers that were surveyed, 45% of them did not have a recycling bin in their classroom. And although this might not seem like a lot, this means that there are 45 teachers where their students do not have an option to recycle, which means that they end up opting to throw their stuff in the trash can, or will have to put the burden on themselves to find a recycling bin in the school. And then another problem that was noted was teachers that did have recycling bins in their classrooms, they often noted having to dig up contaminants, students not being able to see their bins, and their classroom being farther away from other bins. And this goes into the problem that this project tries to address, which is inaccessibility to recycling. And then there is also a student version of this survey that was developed that will be sent out this year. And it's much shorter than the teacher version, but it essentially asks students 5 questions. The first one is a choose all that apply on what students can recycle and what they can't. And then a couple of questions that ask students to rate themselves on a scale from 1 to 5 on how involved they feel with recycling and how energetic and engaged they would be for a project to be distributed across Davies. Now, moving on to the first phase of this project, which is going to be happening this year. This phase starts in the early October and ends in around the time where Thanksgiving break would begin. But this phase has the most information in it, as it's a lot of preparation for the foundations of the project. But the first thing that we want to do is, again, to analyze the survey from last year that we sent out to the teachers, and then with that information, also send out the same survey to the teachers who did not get a chance to fill it out last year, just so we can collect this information and turn our priorities and how we decide to go through with the project based on data that was collected more recently instead of things that we got from last year. And then the second part of this would be to send out the student surveys for students to fill out. And how we plan on doing this is to select one of the team centers at Davies High School and let that be kind of like our experimental group. So although this project will be implemented across the school, we find it easier for there to be one team center that we track the data from, just so it's, again, not a lot of things that we have to track, and it would be much more easier to track, and it's easier to have connections with the teachers because there's not a lot of them in one team center. And also, one concern that we had was student participation with the survey, but by communicating with the 6 or 7 teachers that are a part of a team center, we can ask them to have all of their students fill out the survey, and we get much higher turnout as well. And then the other thing that will begin in phase 1 is the education portion of this project. And like I stated previously, we'll be posting weekly advertisements in the TVs that are around the commons, and these will consist of general recycling facts, Davies-specific recycling facts, and etc. And one goal that we had for last year was to frequently publish QR codes that students would be able to scan. However, with the new policy this year where students are unable to have their own personal devices in school, we kind of had to work around that, but we found that just continuing to post these recycling facts should make up for that. And then something else that I want to mention is the data that we're going to collect from the team center that is selected. What we obviously want to collect is teachers and students and their opinions on it. But something else that we were considering collecting is the actual things that go inside of trash cans and recycling bins. And we thought of tracking contamination through a qualitative scale, where 1 would be the most contamination and 5 would be the least contamination across the classrooms, the recycling frequency of different recyclables, and how often recyclables are found in trash bins. The biggest concern with this part is whether there is enough manpower to go through all of the recycling bins in the team center. And although we're cutting down the amount of classrooms that we analyze for data, it still can get to be a lot, especially considering how there would be 1 trash can or 2 trash cans for every classroom, and whether or not the students participating in the project would have enough time to spend counting these contaminants. But even if we don't go through what's included in the recycling bins, we believe that collecting the student data of their opinions through their survey is still an incredible way that we can track our progress. Now, moving on to the second phase of this project, which will begin obviously after the first phase ends, starting post-Thanksgiving break and going towards the end of the first semester, which is around mid-January. And this phase is broken up into 2 main parts. So the first part is the preparation of the recycling bins. As I previously mentioned, teachers will have the opportunity to fill out a survey, getting them to let us know whether they want a recycling bin in their classroom and if they would want it to be designed. And this is where we will go through the responses that we got from the survey sent out in phase 1 and begin preparing these recycling bins so we can distribute them in the future. And my main goal is to get several different organizations at Davies involved with this, not just Environmental Club, because I don't want to seclude it to just one community and make it a project where students across organizations will be able to engage. And another idea that was brought up is establishing plastic bag recycling sites across Davies. In Fargo, you're not able to recycle plastic bags just like through the system, and you'd have to bring them to one of the like a grocery store such as Cashwise or Hornblockers. And the plan was for students to allow students to bring plastic bags from home and have those be collected every month and brought to Cashwise, Hornblockers, or other institutions that accept them. And that's the first part. The second part of phase 2 is, again, the education. And the TV advertisements will continue to be updated. And a progress survey will be sent out to teachers who have already received the recycling bins if we decide to distribute them in phase 2 as well. And this will also be when we collect the student survey information. And we plan on having information on where students can recycle and what they can recycle posted in each team center, just so students have accessible ways that they can determine whether they're able to recycle something or not, so they won't have to crawl across the school and find something. Now, moving on to phase 3 and phase 4, there is much less content on this slide simply because phase 3 and phase 4 are more like the actual physical implementation of the project, so there's not much going on behind the scenes. So phase 3 is pretty much the actual distribution of the recycling bins that we collected through phase 1 and phase 2. And there's also been the idea floated that we would have a little page in the Fargo-Davies High School website that would refer students to recycling resources, sustainability efforts done by the district and Fargo-Davies, and other resources that they can access so they would be able to educate themselves on how to be a more sustainable student and citizen. And we would also monitor the recycling bins throughout this project. We plan on distributing the recycling bins throughout January and hopefully by the middle of February. And then February to mid-March would just be monitoring them and seeing how students are reacting. Now, I've grouped phase 4 and the conclusion together because they essentially tackle the same things. But phase 4 and the conclusion will consist of us collecting data from the students who were previously surveyed at the start of the year, and the questions would be different just so students don't have bias because they were previously exposed to the questions. But it will, again, ask students on what they can recycle and what they can't, and how involved they feel with their school and recycling. And if we do end up collecting the physical, recycling rates and contamination rates in the team centers, we will recollect them just so we can compare them and see how effective it was. And this will be mostly done at the end of May, but just kind of reflection on how the project went, what we need to change for next year, and how involved the students were with it. And now, 2 of the biggest concerns with this project are student participation and apathy, which I also addressed at the beginning of this presentation, but this project does tackle both of these. Through the student participation, the way that we're combating this is instead of sending out a survey to the entire student body, where they would be less incentivized to fill it out, we will select a specific team center where the students will fill out the survey, just so we can have teachers monitoring and having teachers monitor over the survey as well, and having them fill out the survey before class, after class, or maybe assign it as homework. And also apathy, which was another big concern. And I just want to touch on the fact that apathy doesn't come from people not wanting to contribute to a more sustainable environment, but mostly based on misconceptions and confusion and a lack of communication on what can be recycled and what can't. And this project looks to expand education on recycling, and simply through this, we'd be able to decrease the apathy that many students hold, and also by making it less of a burden on them, as recycling will be incredibly accessible across the school, and they'd be able to access a recycling bin and wouldn't go to a trash can just based on convenience. And also, we allow students to make decisions based on facts instead of just their intuition, which may not always be correct. But that is essentially the end of the presentation. Thank you, guys. And I will take any questions if anyone has any.
Satia, I'm just curious how this will, if this will continue at Davies after you're graduating and others, and then I'm curious if it will ripple out to other schools.
Yeah, so like I stated in phase 4, where we kind of just reflect and see how we're supposed to prepare for the next year. Since the beginning of this year, since like this year is kind of the first year of the project, it'll be a starting point for future years and generations of Davies students to continue with the project. And obviously, since I am collaborating with Environmental Club on this, after I graduate, this project will mostly be in the hands of Environmental Club and students who are also passionate about recycling. And on your question for having this ripple across other schools, I would absolutely love for that to happen. And although Davies might be the most like sustainable school out of the 3 high schools, it's obviously still a priority for me to make sure that all students have access to recycling and not just a specific school.
Maybe James Hand can help you find the direction there.
I'll tell you one thing, if we ever need to advocate to the state for energy and sustainability, I think we should send her. And not
You found your person.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, isn't it something that you go through life and you see a need, you stand up and you start addressing it, and the results start coming in. Mm-hmm. And what a great lesson for you as a future leader and a current leader, Satia, right now, to inspire others to do that kind of stuff. And I'm guessing this is just the beginning of you doing this in your life.
And I think another reason why I'm really passionate about this project is because I believe that when you're in high school, this is where you develop skills for the future. And being able to expose students on how to be environmentally aware, not only does that allow them to be more sustainable like at school, but also be able to consider the environment in the future when they're making decisions.
Maybe we could, James, get Satia over to the school board and present someday, too. Wouldn't hurt. I mean, they'd be inspired by it. Any other feedback and questions at all? Welcome, your first meeting. Thank you very sincerely.
Thank you guys so much.
All right, continuing on. I don't know if we have anybody signed up for public comment or if we have anybody online. Any other feedback for the good of the order today before we adjourn? Our next meeting is coming up December 9th at 3 o'clock, and that'll be our wrap-up for the journey. So be prepared to share however you'd like going forward. And on that note, we stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.